Hello there. This is basically an English version of one of the previous videos I've made. And I'm going to talk here about the patches, addons, some other graphical changes I have on my client. Bear in mind that I'm using an old 1.12 client here. While it could be possible to use the modern 1.14 version with the single player mode too, I don't want to build an entire replacement for the UI at the moment, so the video is based on the older one. Anyway, the results will be that the old client will look almost the same or even better than the modern one, so this doesn't really matter. Also, while I'm using that for the single player mode, the changes will work for any other server you play on. A little disclaimer though. Some servers could even see those changes as unfair cheats. They give you some advantages to other players who do not use them, so use it on your own risk. For single player, you can do anything you want, of course. First, let's talk about the graphical patches. They're not mine. You can find all the patches in the internet, if you know where to look. I'll include the links in the description, so you can download it easily anyways. The first patch is the improved models and textures. This is basically just a backport from the latter clients. I think it's from Legion, or maybe Warlords of Draenor. I don't remember exactly now. So here you can see my characters staying in the Agrimar without the patch. They're not that bad, but you'll notice the difference later on. And take a look at the Agrimar itself. It's kinda a little bit brighter here. This cactus, for example, the other models, just take a look. It's better to see the characters on the login screen actually. You can see they a little bit rough, kinda edged, even square. And here's the same with the patch enabled. You see, even the colors changed, and they look definitely better. The patch renders some artifacts here, but it's only for the login screen. I've never seen them in the game actually. And here we are in Agrimar again. You can see my characters. And the Agrimar itself, you'll notice that the texture a little bit darker here, but I think it's better. For example, the wood can be distinguished clearly here. The windows kind of lit here, and the cactus is actually has bloom and thorns now. So it's definitely better in my opinion. And here is another example. Take a look at the trees. This is Elven Forest without the patch. And now I've enabled the patch, and you can see the trees are changed completely. They have more leaves, branches. Even the house looks more distinct, has better textures. It's a little bit darker again, but in overall I think this is much better. The second patch changes the sound and the music. It basically scores the soundtrack, so some locations receive music from other zones and even later expansions, while the whole theme remains intact. For example, here, if you listen to the music, I'm in a Firewood Village, it's basically the same soundtrack that you can hear in Dark Shore for the lines. And I've enabled the patch. You can hear that the music is completely different. I think it's from Karajan or something like this. And the same for the Silver Pine Forest itself. You can hear the same track as in the Tearfall Glades. I've disabled the patch again here. And I've enabled the patch again, so you see the melody has changed. So there's no repeating soundtracks for different zones anymore. And this music is also from the later expansions here in Agrimar. I usually play the game without the music though, just listening to the radio, but I must definitely admit that WoW has a great soundtrack and the patch enhances this a lot. The patches themselves are just files with MPQ extension. If you want to install them, extract the archives and copy everything into your client in data folder. Make sure they have a consistent numbered names though. I mean, for example, you must rename them to patterns like this: patch 3 MPQ, patch 4 MPQ, patch 5 MPQ, and so on. The client will load them and everything will work. The order of the patches is not important. The only numbering is important. Alright, the next patch I'm gonna talk about is so-known vanilla tweaks. This is a console application which modifies your WoW executable, and it improves some things and fixes some bugs. It's a very important ones, I should say. The first thing it changes is so-called field of view, or FOV. It's actually very important for me, but I'm not sure if it is visible in the video. I've disabled the patch now, and the FOV, what is it? The game was designed in 2004 for the old 4:3 monitors, and they're not widescreen. And while using the camera like this, especially when I'm moving it a lot and so on, it could even cause so-called motion sickness, and for me it's very unpleasant to play. If I move the camera further away, it's still not very great. And the patch actually changes FOV from the later expansion, I think from the Lich King, the values from this, and it becomes more pleasant and at least playable for me. Also, it changes the client that it could use more memory that it's originally set to use. is so-called large memory, large address aware. And you can see here, without the patch, it just cannot load the interior of this building or the door, and just not enough memory. And some patches even do not work without it. And I've enabled it back. You see the buildings and the doors, they're actually okay now. And the second change is the draw distance. By default, the objects in the world are clipped at a very short distance, and you can probably see it here. Notice there's no thunder blue here. The trees kinda ends, and the grass actually stops rendering in the middle of the screen. That's not very good in my opinion. And I've enabled it back. You can see the thunder blue is visible now. You can see a lot more trees in the distance, and basically the grass is okay. It could be visible even on the other side of the lake. But bear in mind that this change will heavily impact the performance of your client, especially if you have an older PC. The drawing requires a lot of processing power to render more objects. So for modern PC, it's not going to be any issue though, but for older ones, you'll probably need to reduce the draw distance, so the performance is okay. For bugs, bug fixes, there's two the most important ones for me. The first, it increases the number of sound channels. So, for example, in dungeons, in raids, where lots of things happens, you cannot see more, or you cannot hear more than, remember, 15 or maybe 16 sounds in the original client. Here, it increases this number, and you can actually hear all the sounds, all the spells and actions other players do. And the most important bug fix is a well-known mouse bug. And the original client has a very annoying bug. When you click the mouse buttons multiple times, the cursor sometimes jumps into the middle of the screen. Combining this with camera controlling like this, it could lead to some very hard to control situations like this, where you move the camera, it suddenly moves in the opposite direction like this. I've actually tried multiple ways to fix that. There's a lot of solutions on the internet, but nothing works. Only this vanilla tricks. I don't know who did that. A big respect to them. This bug actually makes the client completely unplayable for me, and this trick completely fixed it. So yeah, great work. The patcher has some other features, but I do not use all of them. For example, it can increase the range of the nameplates. So let me see this wolf, for example. If I move closer to it, the nameplate appears. And the patch can make it that it will render on even all this range. But I don't think this is a good idea. It's more like a cheat. I don't know, I always imagine that every mob has some kind of a glowing sign. I'm here, do not aggro me. So I'll keep that disabled. And that's probably it for the patcher. Alright, the next part will be highly subjective. I'm going to talk about the colors, gamma, shaders, etc. The results could even depend on the specific monitor or screen of your laptop, so bear that in mind while listening. You might also notice that the picture here looks somewhat sharper, and the colors a little bit different than we used to have in WoW. This is achieved by using a reshade. Let me disable it for the moment. So this is the original look of the WoW client, and I'm enabling it. This is how it changed it. I'm not going to talk where to get it, how to install. Just see the link in the description. It's a well-known tool. But I'll talk a bit about the shaders I use. Let me disable a shade here again, and you could see that those trees, or at least their silhouettes, they will disappear. And if I enable it again, you'll see they're back. This is basically an ambient occlusion, and I achieved that using the PPFX SSDO filter. This filter actually does the job. You can see I'm disabling and enabling it. Okay, I was waiting for the Zeppelin to move away. It seems the filter renders the shadows even further than the client renders the model itself. So I kinda like the overall result. You can see the shadows, the silhouettes, kinda look interesting here. Unfortunately, it could misrender sometimes and produces artifacts like this. It usually happens in tight corridors, and it even depends on the angle. You see it disappears, so you won't see that very often. As I understand, there's no way to fix that, as the client is kinda optimized something here. And the shadows that goes actually from these windows, even the window is invisible, it's closed, the shadow cannot get this information and renders the shadow. In the open world, it usually works fine. I've never seen this, only in small locations like this. There are two other goals that I'm using a shade for. The first one, it improves the overall sharpness of the game and makes it look as the textures have better resolution. Of course, the texture is the same, but it just looks that way, and I like this. You could see the example here. Let me disable the shaders. You see the picture looks kinda blurry. Those signs are kinda indistinguishable from the wall. If I enable it back, you see they're more clear to see. Everything looks sharper and easier to distinguish one object from another. And this is probably a best example, a more dark location. Just compare the pictures. I'll disable the shader and enable it back. This is achieved by using 3 filters. It's clarity. In most games, clarity is more than enough, but I feel that WoW is more blurry than others, so I combine this with 2 other filters. They are Luma Sharpen and Adaptive Sharpen. And the second goal is the color palette. This is the most subjective one. It basically reduces the color saturation and changes some other colors, making it a kind of a more realistic view. That's very controversial, because the colorfulness is one of the attributes of the WoW art style, and if you change it, it's completely here. Let me disable the filter here again. You can see there's a lot of blue and kinda orange and yellow colors here, and the filter basically removes them, making it a little bit more realistic, and that's it. That's actually the result of using a lot of other filters here. It's not a single one, they work in combination with each other. Let me just point what they are. That's a Technicolor, which basically changes the color saturation. Lift, Gamma, Gain, which works in combination with Level Plus, they change the brightness and in the contrast of the picture. And Tone Map, which changes the colors themselves. Basically, the last filter is SMAA. This is the anti-aliasing filter. I don't think it will be visible on the video, but it actually works better than the anti-aliasing we have in the original client. So that's basically it for the reshaped. I'll include the link to the ready-to-use profile in the description. You can select it here. And now let's talk about the addons. I'll be here as short as possible. This is another very subjective stuff. I'm using a highly customized UI based on more than 100 different addons here. I'll include a link to the description. It is an archive containing all the addons I use. But bear in mind that the number of addons is so high that will almost definitely conflict with any other you use, and the only way to make use of it is to replace the whole UI you have. Also, the high number of addons will definitely make your client load the location slower. And vanilla does not support parallel loading, such as Burning Crusade or Lich King, so yes, it will be slow. But it only affects the loading. The actual FPS and the gameplay will be okay. Basically, the UI is designed to have some kind of a minimalistic look, so the addons do not interfere with the gameplay. That's the main goal here. I'll just list some more important addons, and that's it. First, there's the two invisible ones. You could say they're invisible. The first is actually Skinner. It changes the color of the windows, such as this character creation. It removes the texture, make them kind of simple, more darker, so semi-transparent. And the second one is called Breeze More. It allows you to move those windows to any place of the screen you want. Here I'm using foobar with a set of number of addons. I especially like this garbage foo addon, which allows me to see how much gray items I have. It allows me to destroy the less expensive ones and adds a button to the vendors to sell them in one click. For buttons, I use Bartender. It is here. I've reduced the size of the buttons. I actually never looked to them. I never click them. I use the key bindings only. For spellbook, I found this compact one called Discord mini spellbook. I like it. It's kind of small and allows me to pick ranks of spells. The unit frames, they're based on the Luna unit frames. I made them a little bit smaller and sometimes transparent, so they do not interfere with the other things on the screen. Unfortunately, they do not support buffs and debuffs, and those icons here is from a different addon. It's called Buffalo, so I just moved it near to the unit plate, so it looks like the whole thing. For quests and other role-playing stuff, I use vanilla storyline, which renders this kind of window. And to keep track of them, I use an extended quest log, which allows me to read the quest log in a more pleasant way. For map and mini-map, there's actually a cartographer here, and the mini-map is a so-called simple mini-map. I just moved it onto the bottom of the screen and made it a little bit more transparent. For combat, I use custom nameplates, which renders this kind of mob information, and the mob info addon, which shows this tooltip in a compact way near the cursor. For casting, I've got the luck cast addon, which shows here. And for wands and melee, there's an attack bar. I just changed it, so I removed the border because it looks bad in my opinion of it. For loot, there's a X loot, which shows the loot in a simple and easy to use way.
Greetings.
There are lots of other addons
What
I
be
use.
happening?
For example, for chat, there's a prat.
Hi.
For mail, there's a postal. You'll find all the addons in the archive. Just Google the name if you want more details. It's easy to find information. Also note that if you copy the archive to your client, the UI is based on the standard HD resolution. If you have a different one, you probably need to move the windows and the bars to the appropriate place. Also, I'm using here a small change. The fonts, they're different. The archive contains folder fonts. You just copy it into your client and you have the same customized fonts. They're just a little bit more bold and wide. I think it's easier to read. And that's just probably all that I wanted to show here. If you liked the video, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.